It doesn't matter where you are, when Nickelodeon land you are better off by far. Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon.
Look out! Here comes your favorite splats, plops, icks, fizzes, yucks, and slops. Hi, I'm Marc Summers, and this video is overflowing with some of the messiest moments from Double Dare. I'm talking gross, wet whipped creamy stuff. But before we begin, let me give you a quickie overview of the show. You see, first two teams answer questions, but they can always dare the other team, who can double dare them back, and then they can take the physical challenge, which usually means some of the messiest stuff. And then the team that wins goes on to the messiest minute on television.
Hi, everybody. It's Marc Summers, and you're listening to Monday Morning Critic.
Every time I think I'm a host and I listen to your voice, I feel like I have a lot of ground to make up, because that is just I'm like, I have so much ahead of me. Marc, I wanted to ask you first on your last name is Berkowitz, and I was listening to a phenomenal interview you did with Marc Maron. Just I was running today listening to it. Oh, it was so great for those listening. It's Marc Maron's WTF podcast. So I feel like I couldn't figure out if your name change came about because of anti-Semitism or because of the Son of Sam. I feel like it's maybe a little bit of both. Is that?
Yeah, mostly because of the Son of Sam. I had nothing going on in my career. And with the last name of Berkowitz, all of a sudden casting agents weren't allowing me in. So my agent called me and said, nobody knows who you are anyway, change your name. But I had been up against some Jewish guys in high positions at networks telling me, you better change your name and get your nose fixed. You look too ethnic. So, you know, it's ridiculous that sometimes the most anti-Semitic people are other Jewish people.
Wow. Yeah. How long were you in Indy for, Marc?
I left when I was 18, went to join the Navy. I was thrown out after 28 days, story I've never told, and worked in a bank for about a year, and my blood pressure was off the charts. My mom found an ad at the back of 17 magazine that said, come to Boston, learn broadcasting, and I got accepted to a place called Graham Junior College, moved to Boston for 2 years, and then came to LA in 73.
Yeah, and the alumni at that college was pretty amazing. Some of the people that went there.
Yeah, Burt Reynolds, who created Sally Jesse Raphael and Jerry Springer. Paul Fusco created Alf. Andy Kaufman was there. I'm trying to think who else was there. We had a fair amount of very talented folks.
So why were you thrown out of the Navy, Marc? I had to ask.
Bad knees, but it's a much longer story. And if we do that, we will have no time to talk about anything else. But anyway, I really wanted to stay in because I wanted to be in Armed Forces Radio and TV. I did not want to go to college. I just wanted to work in television. And somebody told me I could get in that way. But I ran track and cross country all through junior high and high school, and my knees were a mess. And they didn't want me in for the longest time. I convinced myself and convinced them to put me in. And the deal was, if you come in and you're in the service for 31 days or longer, they have to take care of you the rest of your life. And when they found out how bad my knees were, they wanted to get me the hell out of there.
I got it. What were you like as a kid, Marc?
Well, didn't play with toys. Classic story of me is my dad was taking me to go get some presents for the holidays, and he said, you can get whatever you want. And he kept going to the electric trains and slot cars. And I wanted to buy a radio that had an FM band because I wanted to put on earphones and listen to stations far away from Indianapolis as possible. So I've had an interest in broadcasting from the time I was very little. And if I could listen to WWL in New Orleans or, WABC in New York and be under my covers in Indianapolis, I thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Did you love your time in Indianapolis?
Not particularly. Couldn't wait to get the hell out. And now that my parents aren't there, there's no reason to go back. It's a town that really hasn't changed from the time I was a kid. Other than having we had the ABA, but now they have an NBA team and an NFL team. But I'm not sure what you do on Tuesday there. But that's just my feeling. There are people who love it there, and I'm applauding them. But it's just not a place for me.
And brother, your brother is a super talented drummer, right? Super talented drummer growing up, musician, really has a solid resume, right, Marc?
Yeah, he at age 15 years old he was playing drums for Johnny Mathis and Henry Mancini. They used to bring a band up to the house, and they'd load his drums up, and they'd drive him to New York or Chicago, and he was like playing the Playboy Club way before he was allowed to actually go in the place. And then he toured. He was Marvin Hamlisch's conductor for 10 years, and he was on the road for years with Liza Minnelli, and he's got a hell of a resume. Yeah, he's still doing it. He just retired, kind of. He was conducting the symphony orchestra in Santa Rosa, California for years. His last concert's coming up in April, and many other things. But yeah, he's had an amazing career.
Yeah, well, look who's talking. Let me say this. So, compiling this research, I'm like, I read a quote somewhere where you were like, you kind of had it with podcasts because during the pandemic you were doing them, and you were getting asked the same set of 7 questions. I said, when I'm done with this interview with Marc, I don't want to be one of those podcasts that he dreads coming on. So, Marc, at the end of this interview, please tell me if I am one of those podcasts. I don't want to be one of those podcasts.
I'll be nice, but the problem is everybody thinks they can do it, and as you know, that's not the case. And most people either don't do their homework or don't do a deep enough dive into the homework. And the reality of it is, pretty much anything you ever want to know about me, you can find on the web. And it's hard to interview guys like me. I've been doing this for 50 years now, and so pretty much everybody knows my life. What I did. I was a magician. I did the Comedy Store. I worked at Nickelodeon. I worked at Food Network. I had stops in the middle there with Lifetime Television and History Channel. So, my life isn't that exciting. I'm just a guy who wanted to work in broadcasting and kind of hop from place to place for a while, find a couple of really good jobs and did them. And at 71 and a half, I'm doing podcasting. Go figure it out, Yeah,
you look great, too. We're going to get to your podcast in a moment. But I got to tell you, Marc, you're right about everybody has a podcast. Like, I've been doing it for 7-8 years. I've been busting my ass for a long time. But there's people that get a microphone on Amazon, they put it on. When they figure how much work it is, it screws those of us that kind of, you and I are obviously in different, you have a much different podcast as far as who you know and how you conduct yourself. But like, it does really hurt when I reach out to a publicist and somebody says, no, they've had too many bad experiences. Like, we're good. Like, they've ruined it. The small batch has ruined it for those that really love it. And that, to your point.
That's true. But even I had a hard time, like when I was trying to book Gabriel Iglesias, Fluffy, I had to go to hell and back to get him. I would talk to 2 managers, an agent, a publicist, was turned down. And you have to think of, clever ways to get to these people, because I just said, look, he knows me. He likes me. Just tell him it's me. Don't run interference. Don't tell him and then say he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't even know I've asked him to do it. And of course, I sent a picture where I had pied him when he was on the Double Dare set and put it on his come here, Dougie. Hold on, my dog wants up. Come here, Charlie. He wanted. That's Charlie. Say hi.
Oh, hey, Charlie. How cool is that? That is very cool. Charlie's beautiful. What kind of dog is Charlie, Marc?
Well, he is Chihuahua, Jack Russell, and part Tasmanian Devil, I think. He's nuts, but he's a great little dog and very, very affectionate. I've been gone for the last week, so he's been sticking to me like glue today. So
yeah, very sweet.
But anyway, podcasts are as good as you want them to be. And if you want to do the time and put in the work, they can be fantastic. Or if you want to phone it in like most people do, they can suck.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, you're so right with the publicists. Like, there's some really good ones out there, but there's ones that definitely don't do their homework and just give. I could write a book on it, but your point is well received. Let me ask you this. So, I was really surprised at the amount of adversity you've overcome in your life, right? So you've had 3 bouts with cancer. You had a very serious car accident. Granted, you've told these stories before, but there are people listening that have never heard this. They don't know the amount of adversity, and that doesn't even include the OCD that apparently Howard Stern was magically cured of by Dr. Sarno. But anyways, Marc, say whatever you want about your life, because it really is a testament of resiliency.
You dealt with certain cards, and when I first got diagnosed with cancer, I was lower than whale poop, and I was in the doctor's office, and he wanted to do a bone marrow extraction, and I walked out of the office, and my wife said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I can't do cancer. Let's just go home." And got talked into it, went back and did it, and doctor said it's going to be like a bad bee sting. It was like the entire hive bit me, but that's another story. And so I went through chemo for a couple of years, and then I was good for a while, and then I had to go through chemo again, and then I was good for a while, and then I had to go through chemo again, and now I'm on some pills that cost way too much money. The car accident was one of those freaky things. I was shooting, I think it was Restaurant Impossible, in Kansas City, I believe, and flew home through a very bumpy plane ride. And when we landed, had to take a cab to the office because we were behind on stuff. And I was idiotic talking on the phone to the office saying, I'll be there in a minute. Didn't put on my seatbelt. And the guy hydroplaned on Highway 95. And my whole face went into the credit card machine in front of me and broke. I didn't know this until I was watching a thing on the local news. I had broken every bone in my face. I wasn't aware of that. And I went through a couple of surgeries, never thinking I was going to be able to look the way I used to. And I was lucky enough to find an amazing guy who was able to put it back the way it was. I'm not sure that's maybe been the smartest thing, but he did it well. And and the OCD thing's been a part of my life since I was a kid. It runs in families, and my family had it big time. And I didn't get diagnosed until I was hosting my own live talk show on Lifetime Television and sort of spilled the beans. And the next thing I know, I'm on Oprah and I'm writing books and I'm on the Today Show and I'm on Howard Stern discussing it. And, millions of people have it, but me and Howie Mandel are probably the two most well-known people who have it. Howie got a pass. I didn't, but there's ways to control it. And I've found some ways to make my life 92% better. And Howie, I think, is still fighting it. So I talk to him from time to time, and he's finally, he's on some medication. He goes to shrinks and things, but it's like, I've never done drugs or alcohol, but I think it's the same thing. Until you're ready to say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, you just keep doing it.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And thank God you're here with us. So that's a good thing. Your life got me thinking. When I announced on my Facebook page that you were coming on, there was a lot of really excited people. And I was trying to make the comparison of who your life is like. I mean, you're not like this person, but your effect on a generation or multiple generations is. I feel like your effect is a lot like Fred Rogers, right? I mean, you guys are different people.
That's very sweet.
But your impact with your shows, like there was people that said, "Oh my God, you're giving me the feels." I've got texts from friends saying, let me know when it's published. The interviews go. So you've had an impact on generations of people, Marc, and that cannot be understated. I mean, look at it any way you want, but that's just a fact.
I didn't realize how much of an impact the program had until I went on this last tour when we brought it back for about 60 episodes when Liza Koshy and I did it. And I took it out on the road for 18 months. We did, I forgot about it, maybe 120 cities, something like that. Don't remember at this point, but a lot of them. And we do these backstage meet and greets. And a lot of times it was just two grown-ups with no kids. And I'd say, where are the kids? And they'd say, well, hell, we want to have a good time on our own. And they just want to relive their childhood. And people said such nice things. So, yeah, I was kind of in the right place in the right time. My sense of humor seemed to connect with that generation. Look, I've always had fun. I always say I've never worked a day in my life. And I've been lucky enough to make a living doing that,
No, it's beautiful. And maybe my memory's not, maybe it is, but I thought you brought that show on the road earlier and it was selling out by the thousands. Am I correct, Marc? Is my memory on that?
Robin and I, we started doing malls. Okay. And we've drawn so many people at malls that the shops couldn't get anybody to come in. The food court loved us, but if you're trying to get into Macy's, you couldn't do it because there were, throngs of people. So they started taking us to arenas, and I was like a rock star for kids. I was doing the Palace of Auburn Hills, selling out 20,000 seats twice a weekend.
Wow.
We would play theaters such as that, just crazy stadiums. And it was fun. You had to learn how to do that because the timing was totally different. And we did a lot of audience participation. I'd run out in the audience and grab, 80 people in the first, couple hours of the show. And some would do physical challenges and some would, attempt to be chosen as contestants. And then we played the game as it was on TV. And then we rested it for a long time until it came back. And I suggested going on the road. When you do this live, when you're in your late 30s, early 40s, and then you go out again when you're in your mid to late 60s, it's a whole different show.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, but it's hard too. Yeah,
I was trying to run around like I was a kid. It was a little more difficult, but we had fun. And I just live is what I like doing best. And if you walk into a place and there's thousands of people wanting you to entertain them, that to me is more fun than anything.
Yeah. And like I said, the affinity that the generations have for you is just such a beautiful thing. I have to bring this next thing up only because you're asked this all the time. And I was dying to ask you this because I watched it in real time. I remember watching you and Burt on Jay. And I remember saying to myself, boy, I love both of these guys. And when everything ended, I'm like, I only like one of these guys. Like I was not. Bert's an angry guy, and when Sally Fields, I remember she said a quote. She said he used to always tease me about my awards. I'm like, he's just such. I mean, listen, I love him as an actor. I'm not going to get into that, but he came across as so angry. I'm like, really, Bert? Like I was rewatching those clips knowing that we were going to speak, and I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot of anger there. There's a lot of processing and therapy that needs to be had there. I wasn't thrilled with it, Mark. I thought that was not fair to you. I thought you handled yourself really, really well.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, Lonnie Anderson told me once she didn't know which Burt was coming in that day. You know, was it the good Burt or the bad Burt when he'd come home? I think he was a troubled guy. Things that I know about his life that I'm not privileged to talk about at this point. But when you have to put on lifts and toupees to become that character, he had a good sense of humor. But I also think it's sad that when he died after being the #1 box office star in the world for 5 years, he kind of died with not a lot of dough. The TV thing worked for a while, but then there's stories of him on the set getting angry, doing crazy stuff. And, I had been waiting my whole life to be on the Tonight Show, preferably with Johnny. Didn't make that, but at least being on with Jay was, interesting to me.
Right.
And all hell broke loose. And, once again, people still think the whole thing was set up. It was not.
No. No way.
Yeah. And so it never goes away. I still get residuals when they play it globally. People stop me on a weekly basis wanting to talk about it. It was one of those bizarre situations that happen on national TV. And certainly when you're on the Tonight Show, a lot of people see it. The next day in New York, on the New York Post, the headline, I think it was the Post that said, Burt goes berserk on Tonight. And, I was being interviewed by everybody. It was an interesting time. But it was 1994.
I can't believe that. I can't. Same year the Shawshank Redemption came out. I can't believe it. Can't believe it. For those listening,
watch Burt Reynolds and me on the Shawshank Redemption.
For those listening or watching, Mark and I are talking about when Mark was on the Tonight Show. He and Burt, just watch it. It's on YouTube. I always wonder, and I'm bouncing around here because I want to save you some time. Do you ever wonder what Double Dare would have been like with Dana Carvey?
You know what? It would have been a different show.
Different show.
The rumor is, and I still can't get to him, that he was chosen first and then got Saturday Night Live and said, I'm going to go do that instead. Good move for him. Good move for me. I was at a comedy club that he was working not far from where I live. And I asked the owners if, I could see him. And they said, here's the deal with Dana. The minute he's off stage, my job is to stand at the exit door with the keys to his car in my hand. And by the time you're not even out the door, he's driven away. So he wouldn't see me. I know people who know him. I still can't find the answer if that was a true story or not, but supposedly it was.
Yeah. You're a big late night talk show fan. Like you loved Carson growing up. I mean, you loved Carson before the Tonight Show. I mean, you were a big Carson guy. Mark, you know who was really good, and if she was alive today, she'd be better than anybody on late night. Is Joan Rivers?
See, I totally disagree.
You don't think she would have been a great?
Well, I did a talk show with her. She never looked at me once. All she did is look to the side and read cue cards. Wasn't listening to what I said. Asked me a question. I answered it, and then went in a little different direction. Then the next question was about what I just answered, and she asked me the same question again. I was not impressed. When we were doing Double Dare, she was staying in the same hotel that we were at one point, and I actually called her room. She picked up. I said, "How we got on your show?" She gave me the information. I didn't get on at that point, but down the road, after I had done many more things, I did do the talk show, and I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, she did stand up that either liked her or you didn't. She could be mean and rude, and that was her act. And she was fast and all that kind of stuff. But late night, don't think so. In my opinion, it's just my opinion.
But if you're asking somebody a question and not listening, you're right. I mean, what's the point of being a talk show host? But I don't know. I just like tonight though. Like when I watch, when I want to just settle down, or if I'm watching a late night show, I don't know. It's gotten so how many Trump jokes can I hear at night? Like if I'm sacrificing sleep, please make me laugh before I go to bed. Like Colbert and his countless Trump jokes. It's like, okay, we get it. He's a buffoon, whatever. But I don't know what. I remember Letterman would just do stupid pet tricks, or this person would I just want to laugh. I don't want to get into another political dialogue. I loved late night kind of in the same genre. You liked it. I don't know. Am I onto something there, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, all talented people, but I think you're right. How dead can this horse be beaten? I think Kimmel is the best as far as doing outside the box stuff. Um, Tonight Show, I just don't watch. Depending on who's on Colbert, I'll watch. But I generally go to Jimmy. I just like him. He's just a likable guy. I happen to know him, but he's just a likable guy. It's a tough thing. Last time I saw Jimmy, I was at a charity event. We both are huge food fans, and him especially with pizza. And we were at this pizza event in L.A. And I said, "How's the show going?" And he said to me, "Oh, come on, man, you know." And I said, "What's that mean?" He goes, "You know how hard it is," and it is. He's been now 20 years every night. 5 nights a week. To turn out quality programming is impossible. But he's one of the few guys who's been able to do it. But the thing about it is he's so likable. And you can't teach anybody likability. You either have it or you don't. People used to think Letterman was surly. Okay, to a certain extent, but he was damn funny and original and creative. And my opinion, I loved him. There were those people who thought Jay was the best, but far few people can do it. And Johnny was, I think, the kingpin. Although Jack Parr and those folks back in the day were quite good at what they did. They were unique.
My very first guest 7 years ago was Jimmy's warm-up, Don Barris, who's a big comedy store guy.
Really?
And, my very first guest years and years ago. But you, another topic, you're a big pizza guy too. I thought I was reading earlier. Yeah. What? Okay, Mark. So, I'm so happy that this is right. So, I've had arguments with previous guests, right? So,
Yeah.
I say that anybody that puts pineapple on their pizza should be banned for pizza for life.
Yes.
What's your ideal pizza look like, Mark?
You judge a pizza in any restaurant by the margarita. If the margarita sucks, everything else is going to suck. I was this past weekend at South Beach Wine and Food, and my dear friend Mark Vetri, who he's been voted the number one Italian chef in the country several times, and he makes pizza better than any human I've ever met. But this weekend, Saturday night, he took me to a restaurant called Lucali, which has a branch in Brooklyn, but there's also one in in Miami. Holy cow. I mean, I like very thin crust. I want to be able to read a newspaper through it. I don't like Chicago pizza. Who did I have an argument with about this recently? I just don't get Chicago pizza at all.
It's gross. It's disgusting. It's
just bread with sauce and cheese on it. I don't get it. But I just like pizza, and it's got to be. We have a place here I live in Santa Barbara called Bettina. These guys are from New York, and they know what they're doing, and it's magnificent. But the American public will go to any chain that has pizza and think it's great. If you don't know any better, I guess it's good to you. That's all that matters. But I'm more an aficionado and very particular about the pizza I eat.
Yeah, and those of us that have followed you through your career, and you mentioned earlier, you have an extensive Food Network background, food show background as a producer and so forth. Did you ever cross paths with, oh my God, I forget, Anthony Bourdain?
I did. At South Beach Food and Wine several years back. And he gave me a compliment in an article, and he hated everybody at Food Network. There was always trashing everybody. And he said I had the best hair on the channel, which is about the only compliment I think you could give any talent at Food Network. He was an interesting guy. He created the term culinary journalist. But sad, what a troubled guy he was to have to do what he did to in the middle of all of his success. But you just don't know about depression and how it affects certain people. So that was, needless to say, very sad.
Heartbreaking. One of your experiences as Joker's Wild as a game show host. Howard Stern used to always say that was the dream job to have, was to be a game show host. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun. Very few people can do it and do it well. But your whole day is about giving people money and prizes. How bad was that? And so I've hosted more than 25 shows, hard to believe, but certainly Double Dare is the one that everybody remembers. I did another one called What Would You Do, which is probably the second most remembered thing. A lot of pilots and things such as that. I used to fill in on Scrabble on NBC from time to time. I mean, how bad is it? You talk to people, they answer questions. The best game shows are answer question, get check. And I was lucky to do a few of those things. And you're just making people smile and laugh. And that's what I've been doing for my entire career.
Yeah, let's talk about your career. Let's talk about Marc Summers Unwraps. Great podcast. I listened to an episode 2 days ago with Guy. See, I'm going to mess up his last name because you guys were talking about it. Now it's in my head.
Yeah.
Fieri. Yeah, I say Guy Fieri, but there's people that say Fieri. They throw like the accent on it. But it was a wonderful interview. You guys have a great rapport with each other. Talk about your podcast, Marc, and then talk about your rapport with Guy.
I, as I mentioned, wasn't thrilled about doing a podcast. Got talked into it, and I'm glad they did, because you need a hook, and my hook was overcoming obstacles. You go to a Broadway show, or you go to a movie, or you see a TV show, and you say, "Well, the people who are doing that must be the luckiest humans in the world." But the reality of it is, they weren't lucky. They worked their ass off to get where they are. And the question I wanted to raise was, why do some people go over the wall, around the wall, under the wall, through the wall, and other people go, oh, okay, I'm just going to go home and I'm not going to do this? And it's, from Lin-Manuel Miranda to, well, we've had great guests on the show talk about it. Anthony Ramos, who was in Hamilton and is now starring in every movie. I did summer stock with him. And when I was doing it, we were doing Grease. I was Vince Fontaine, and he was had a smaller part in it, but he would show up first, rehearse like crazy, do the show, and then stay afterwards and rehearse some more. And we all looked at him and said, someday that kid's going to be a big star. And guess what? He is, because he was willing to put in the time. And, back in the day when I was producing, I would have people just jumping out of college coming to me wanting to be producers. And, I used to say there's no jobs for president today. You got to work your way up. You've got to be a production assistant and, run errands and, get behind the scenes and learn how it works. And maybe after 5 to 7 years, you get to become a producer, but you don't come out of college and get that job. Although MTV changed everything, because when they first started, if you had a pulse and were accepting $1 an hour, you would get that job. In some ways that works for you. It kind of worked for Double Dare in that we had no supervision. The people who were doing it had never done a game show before, and it was kind of trial by error. And you added whatever personality I brought to it and my knowledge of game shows, and we got what we got. It didn't work all the time. But I think what we're trying to do is discuss. We had Anthony, Guy Fieri was our second guest, Leah Deloria, another performer. We've got Al Roker coming on. Mike O'Malley is coming up, and my producers think it's one of the best ones we did.
Wow.
To me, Mike is the most successful talent that ever came out of Nickelodeon. As he's been in theater, he has starred in movies. He's written God knows how many shows as exec producer. He guest stars on shows. He's multi-talented, multifaceted person. And, I've known him forever. And we talked for, I think, 2 hours. They cut it down to about 1 hour and 15, I guess. But, once again, willing to do the work to get where he needed to be.
Yeah, and I was thinking, you're talking about people that have gone through adversity, and shame on me for not mentioning this earlier. Like you've had your own. I mean, not the the sickness stuff, but you went through. I mean, for your career wise, you did stand up. You were a magician. You were selling smoked salmon by the pound. I mean, you were doing all this stuff, Marc. So if there's anybody that knows what it's like to persevere through adversity and paying your dues, I would say you're the right host for this gig.
Well, we were selling 80,000 pounds a month at the Price Club, so that wasn't a bad deal. It was another thing. I learned I was good at selling. I was good at selling myself, but I was also good at selling salmon. Now, the salmon was a great product, so if I would have taken crappy stuff and tried to sell it, it wouldn't have worked. But, we were doing Trader Joe's and Price Club, which eventually became Costco and things like that. I just always had a passion, and I always wanted to figure out how to get from point A to point B. When you grew up in Indiana and you turn on Who Do You Trust with Johnny Carson, or the Ed Sullivan Show, or the Tonight Show when Johnny got that, I used to ask myself, how did they do that? How did they get there? And I went to New York when I was 13 and saw my first Broadway show, Fiddler on the Roof, and thought, wow, I've never seen anything like that. How do those guys get that job? And so I started. We had one newsstand in Indianapolis that sold variety. And every Saturday I take a bus downtown, spend 50 cents for variety, read it cover to cover twice, and go back next Saturday and get the next one. And so I wanted to learn. I wanted to educate myself about the entertainment business. I would try to get near these people. I would try to talk to them. I would try to get backstage. I would try to interview them. Whatever I could do to get close to these folks to find out what made them tick was important to me. And you have to also be persistent. I really didn't get where I wanted to go until I was 34. I started making a good living when I was doing warm-ups. I was doing warm-ups on, oh my God, Star Search and Webster and What's Happening Now and Our Magazine and insane amounts of programming. And I was making six figures long before anybody knew in the Comedy Store what the hell that even meant. And I kept it quiet because obviously I didn't want anybody else to know how to get those jobs.
Right.
But after a while, you do get tired of asking people where they're from and introducing the producers, the directors, and the stars of the show, and then trying to fill in the time, which is brutal to do. And, you kind of want to be the person out there instead of the person talking about the people out there. And at 34, it happened for me. But, I also say that if I would have gotten the opportunity to audition for Double Dare when I first moved out and I was 21 or 22 years old, I wouldn't have gotten it because I wasn't seasoned enough. So half the fun is getting there. You just don't realize it at the time. And so I had put in so many hours in front of audiences that when I did get the opportunity, I was ready. And it turned out to be, right place, right time.
Yeah. How fun was it shooting those episodes of Double Dare? I mean, I know it was exhausting. You must have had, listen, I'm not dumb enough to realize that, hey, it looks as fun as it is. I know how much work you're putting in on your end, but when you look back, you have to be so proud of that.
Oh my God. It was a great team. Mike Klinghoff, our exec producer, Dana Calderwood, our director, Alan Silverberg, our head writer, Harvey, Robin, Dave, and everybody on the set. I don't think we ever had to fire anybody. We just got along. We laughed the whole time. We couldn't believe that they were paying us to do this job. And we got up to doing 6 shows a day. And it wasn't a lot of work. Yeah, we did 3 upfront games. And then we did 3 obstacle courses, went to lunch, came back, did 3 upfronts and 3 obstacle courses. When we were down in Orlando shooting at Nick Studios at Universal, it was crazy because it kept turning the audiences over. We turn over the audiences 6, 7, 8 times a day because so many people wanted to come and watch it. So sometimes you might only see the upfront game or you may see 3 obstacle courses in a row. But everybody had fun and we laughed and we grabbed people out of the audience and slimed them. And I don't know. It was... I always say between that and doing Unwrapped for Food Network, we're 2 of the best jobs, ever.
Great show for sure. Let me ask you, how do you decide on guests for your podcast? So I know the purpose. I know what you're saying. I get it. I have a criteria that I use. How do you use it, Marc? You have obviously more connections. Many of your friends are public figures. How do you decide get on a guest, Marc? Because the ones you're naming now are fantastic.
Well, they have to have a story. When I was getting, Gabe Iglesias, I knew he had a story. I don't want people just to come on and plug movies or TV shows. They're of no interest to me whatsoever.
Right.
And so you got to have a good story. Now, I have friends who won't do it. I asked my friend Bobby Flay, and he won't do it. He says, I only do my own podcast. I love Bobby. He's one of my best friends, and so I get it. I respect him. Dennis Miller and I have lunch every week. And I've tried to get Dennis to come on. He said, I just want to come on and hear your showbiz stories. I don't want to talk about me. So I can't get Dennis. So there are people that I would like to get who won't do it. But Dennis has a fabulous story. Says Bobby's got an amazing story, but I can't get him to come on.
Dennis Miller is a genius. He's a freaking genius. He's a genius.
I always tell him that I need a dictionary, a thesaurus, and an encyclopedia when we eat because he tries to stump me with his frame of references, but he brings up stuff that's insane. But then I'll make some comments, and he'll come up with a joke in a nanosecond. Okay. He may be the smartest human I've ever met in my entire life. And he's so damn funny. He should be back on TV. Doesn't have any interest in doing it. Good for him. But I look forward to those days because besides being entertaining, he educates me as well, which I love.
He randomly comes on like Sirius Radio to talk like fantasy sports or talk the NFL. Dennis is so quirky in how he does it, but good for him. Screw it. If he does it, it makes him happy. You had a quote that I don't know that I can relate to, but I absolutely understand. Your meeting with Mike Douglas, you said something to the effect of, sometimes you don't want to meet your heroes. I think you said it. I hope you said it. Talk about that, Marc, because I thought it was a pretty profound, important quote.
Well, growing up watching the Mike Douglas show, thought he was pretty damn good at what he did. And a friend of mine was a producer on the Mike Douglas show for 10 minutes, and he was going to book me. I had worked with Bob Barker on Truth or Consequences last year. He hosted it, and I got him to introduce me on a tape, sent it to the Douglas show. My friend was there, and he said, I'm going to book you on the show. And he said, I'm going to get David Brenner to introduce you. Okay, great. When? I'll call you back. So 2 weeks go by, and Burt never calls me back. I call and leave a message to the Mike Douglas show for the next month, and Burt, for some reason, never calls me back. Well, this was long before 9/11, where security got ridiculous. I read in TV Guide that David Brenner was going to be at the Tonight Show. So I walked over to NBC, went right backstage, knocked on his door, and I said, hi, my name is Marc Summers, and you're going to introduce me on the Douglas show. He says, I have no idea who the hell you are. And I'm doing the Tonight Show. If you can stay around afterwards, I'll talk to you. So it ended up that he informed me that my friend Burt was fired as a producer. He and the exec producer, Woody Frazier, got into a fight. Burt got fired. And what happened was Brenner said, I would never introduce you. I don't know if you're funny or not. I don't have time to follow your career. And so good luck. And so I thought, well, okay. I used to be a page at CBS. They were going to shoot the Mike Douglas show for a week at CBS, and I still had ways to get backstage. So I went backstage at CBS Television City, knocked on Mike Douglas's door, and said, hi, my name is Mark. My friend Burt Reynolds used to be a producer. He told me I was going to be on your show, and can I have a discussion with you about it? And he went nuclear on me. Don't meet your heroes. I don't know who you are. I don't have time to talk to you. I've got Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire on. I'm nervous and I need to go do with that, and get out of my life, basically, is what he said. And I was stunned by that. Here was this guy I grew up watching, thought he was amazing. Was I out of line? I don't know. I was too dumb to know if I was or if I wasn't, but there's certainly nicer ways to handle those things. So I went downstairs in the lounge and wrote this, probably a 5-page letter explaining who I was, what I did, my relationship with Burt, how he promised me to be on, yada, yada, yada. Knocked on the door. His wife was there, and she informed me that neither Mike or her had time to talk to people like me. Not everybody got a chance to be on the Mike Douglas show, and not everybody was allowed to, interact with him. So I handed over the letter, whether he saw it or not, I don't know. And I never did the Mike Douglas show, but I was crazy enough and persistent enough to try and make that happen. But it's happened to me several times where I've gone to meet, quote, my heroes, and was disappointed after the fact.
Well, I can tell you, he's not disappointed about that. I'm not disappointed because I met my hero, so I appreciate that. 2 quick questions for you, Mark.
Yes,
the time Spielberg told you sounded like Tom Hanks.
Yeah, Spielberg had a company for 10 minutes that was producing a game show that I was lucky enough to host called Majority Rules, and Steven didn't have a lot of. I had slimed him at the opening of Nick Studios, and I ran into him a couple of times. He's always a very sweet guy, but really had no interest in doing game shows. He wanted to do movies, and so they would show him rough cuts of our shows. And I was told that he referred to me as the fake Tom Hanks. He said that Tom and I had the same voice. Tom Hanks and I have no voice that's any similar at all. I don't know why he thinks that is, but that was his deal. And it's another guy, I would like to meet Tom Hanks. It's one guy I've not met. I would love to get him on the show. I tried to get to him. He was doing a Broadway show. I was living back east. I sent him a FedEx that got backstage and said, here's what I'd like to say. And, can we get together and yada, yada, yada. And he never even responded. So some point I'll get him.
Greatest actor ever, in my opinion. I mean,
yeah, well, there are no big movie stars left other than Tom Hanks,
Well, I totally agree. Anything else you wanted to get about your podcast that I might have missed, Mark? Is there anything you want to...
We're on, all the, as they say, places where your podcasts are heard. We're on iHeart and, every other one that you can imagine. And so you can hear us and you can see us on YouTube because we also videotape everything. And sometimes I think it depends. I take walks a lot and I listen to podcasts, but I also think it's fun to watch them. And so, however you're inclined, it's called Marc Summers Unwraps. Get online and, follow us and listen to what we have coming up. I think you'll be entertained.
Yeah.
What did you like about it, Derek?
About your podcast?
Yeah.
I like the way it flowed when you and Guy were talking. It seemed like, I know you have a relationship with him before the podcast, but the flow of the conversation did not seem cardboard. It did not seem artificial. It was like I was sitting in on two guys I was eavesdropping on two guys having a conversation.
That's exactly what I wanted. And because I know him so well, as once again, I was doing Food Network starting one, and we became instant friends. I got him his agent that he still has. And I was at his 55th birthday party a few weeks ago, and I was with him this past weekend down at South Beach Wine and Food. In fact, I went to dinner with him at Joe's Stone Crabs Friday night, and he lied to everybody and told me it was my 80th birthday. And so we all got up. We had like 3 tables, and the whole restaurant was singing "Happy Birthday" to me. It wasn't my birthday, but he's just the greatest guy and fun and funny. And I always say, Guy wouldn't give me the shirt off his back. He gave me the skin off his back. Whatever I've asked for him, favor-wise, he's been the nicest guy in the world. And Rachel Ray the same way. Anything I've ever asked Rachel to do, I just did her show the other day, and all I have to do is text them and say, "Hey, I need some help." They're there. I'm so fortunate to have been at Food Network at the right place at the right time and be friends with the Flays and the Michael Simons and guys and all of them. We never had a bad person in the bunch, and we're all still pretty damn close over the years.
Yeah, Emerald too. You have good things to say about. I've heard in other interviews.
Great guy. He's amazing. Yeah. I was with him this past weekend as well, and nicest guy in the world.
Well, I went to go see the movie 80 for Brady with my wife, and I said on the way back when I went running, I said I'm going to put your interview in, and I loved it. You have a great. So for me, I love Bill Maher. He has a great way of talking to people. I love Rogan. He has a great way of. Rogan's a great listener. Forget his opinions. He's a good. Even if he disagrees, he listens. I felt this. Yeah, you have unlike our friend who I brought up who I thought was going to be a good talk show host. You actually listen to people. But that's key. It's like you're so good at it. Again, it's nice to be at a podcast where people aren't trying hard. Like it's just a nice flow, a nice conversation. Like where you're, oh, okay, I agree. Oh, I see what they're saying. Like I'm not an expert on podcasting, but I know what a good conversation sounds like, and that.
Listening is the key. It's not about me. It's about the person on the other side of the table.
Yes.
And I often do 10 to 12 pages of research. And if I get to page 3, I'm happy. Because one thing leads to another, which is, once again, what Joan Rivers didn't do. But what I try to do, because I try and do many, many deep dives, find out things about, when I interviewed Guy and found out he didn't graduate from high school, my head exploded. I thought I knew everything about him. And guess what? I didn't. But sometimes I'll be outside just, hanging out with a dog and the phone will ring and it'll be Guy and saying, "Hey, Summers, what's up? Haven't heard from you," And those phone calls are nice. Bobby Flay the same way. One night, it was a year ago, actually, I'm home watching a movie and Bobby calls me and says, "Hey, dude, they're talking about you on Saturday Night Live," and they were doing some sketch where some guy was imitating me. So, you get interesting phone calls from people who've been friends for many years. And, to be in that pop culture world where I've been in Mad Magazine and lucky enough to be on Howard Stern a few times and Oprah and The Tonight Show and, be represented on Saturday Night Live. It's been a fun career. I have no complaints.
That was cool. Was that a picture of you and Snoop on your Twitter? What a great picture that was. You and Snoop Dogg. For those listening on Marc's Twitter, please go. It's just a great pic.
I was backstage. It was actually at South Beach Food and Wine, and he was going to be a surprise guest with Guy. So Guy invited me backstage, and Snoop and I took some pictures together. He actually used to be my neighbor. We had moved into this neighborhood, and 4th of July, and he was having a massive party. And the next thing we know, all the shrubs around Snoop's house were on fire, I guess, the barbecue. And I reminded him of that, and he said, "Yeah, I was there. I remember."
Yeah. Last thing about podcasting, we talked about listening. I've seen people ask actors on the show, like these actors who are giving their time, and they talk more about their life. It's not an interview anymore. It's a monologue. So, like, why have somebody on the show? Like, it's a waste of everyone's time. Let me just say this. I hope I brought something different to the podcast today. I hope you didn't waste your time. I hope I'm not one of those people that
you listen. That's the whole thing. Once again, the reason you've been doing it as long as you have, and you did your homework, but you listen and you ask good questions.
No, I appreciate that. And I want to say this last thing. I know there was people growing up, my friends, who didn't have the greatest lives, but I'm telling you, man, Double Dare changed their lives, because for that half hour, for that hour, for whatever, they had something else to think about besides life. And I know I'm smothering you, but it's the truth, Marc. What you've got.
It's very kind of you to say that stuff, and I get it. Kids come from broken homes, or a dad's not there, or who knows what the hell's going on. And that's what was so fun about doing the live show, because people would come backstage and tell you those stories, and you kind of want to hug them all and hand them fabulous prizes, as they say, but sadly you can't do it to everybody. But if you can provide half hour of entertainment once a day and make them not forget about whatever those problems are, then I accomplished my goal.
Yeah. The name of the podcast is Marc Summers Unwraps. You can find it everywhere, Apple, iTunes. Marc, thank you so much for this time. It is very valuable, and I treasure this opportunity.
Great job, my friend. Continued success, and thank you for asking me on your program.